My name is Kevin Hussey. I have spent my life listening to stories whispered by roads, forests, and forgotten houses. Some tales beg to be told, not for comfort but as a warning. What you are about to hear is one of them. I had been riding through the forest for 3 days when I realized the silence was wrong. Not peaceful wrong. And oh birds, no insects. Even my horse, Ashen, had stopped snorting and tossing his head. He walked with careful steps, as if the ground itself might listen. The forest had no name on any map I owned. It wasn't meant to. Traders spoke of it only in lowered voices, calling it the crossing, a place you entered when all other roads failed you. I told myself stories exaggerated. I told myself hunger and fatigue were to blame. That was before I met the old man. He stood in the middle of the path, as if he had grown thin, bent, his beard tangled like roots. His clothes were clean but old, stitched too carefully for a traveler. His eyes, though clouded, were sharp enough to make my hand tighten on the reins. "You're lost," he said, smiling. I didn't answer. Something about him made lying feel dangerous. "Your horse is tired," he continued, "and you are hungry." Ashen stamped once, uneasy. "I know a house," the old man said gently. "Warm food, shelter, just for the night." Every warning I'd ever heard rang in my skull. Forest hospitality was never free. Still, my body betrayed me, my mouth dry, my stomach hollow, my vision swimming at the edges. "One night," I said. The old man's smile widened, just slightly too far. "One night," he agreed. The house appeared sooner than it should have. One moment there were only trees, and the next it stood among them tall, wooden, with windows that reflected no light. Smoke rose from the chimney, yet the air carried no scent of fire. As I dismounted, Ashen refused to move forward. His ears flattened, muscles rigid. "You may leave him outside," the old man said. "Animals don't cross the threshold." That should have been my last chance to turn back. Inside, the house was larger than the forest had allowed for. Corridors stretched too long, doors stood too close together. The walls were lined with portraits, dozens of them, each showing people who looked unfinished. Their eyes were wrong, like they'd been painted from memory. Figures emerged from different rooms to greet me. They looked human. They were not. Their movements lagged by a fraction of a second, as if they had to remember how joints worked. Smiles appeared where smiles belonged, but never reached their eyes. Each introduced themselves politely, their voices calm and practiced. "We follow a rule," one of them said, a woman with hands too still. "Every guest must stay 23 days. My heart dropped. "I was told one night," I protested. The old man, now standing behind me, placed a hand on my shoulder. It was colder than the forest air. "One night is never enough," he said. Before I could move, the door behind me closed on its own. The sound echoed through the house like a verdict. That night, they explained the ritual. Each day, one member of the house would host me in their room. They would prepare a meal. They would offer hospitality. No one explained what that meant. "Survive the days," the woman said calmly, "and you may leave on the morning of the 24th. And if I don't?" I asked. And no one answered. Why first host was called Elias. His room smelled of old linen and damp wood. A table stood in the center, set neatly, plates empty, cutlery polished. "Sit," Elias said. I obeyed. He smiled, and the candles went out. In the darkness, I heard breathing that was not my own. The walls whispered my name, my real name, one I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Memories I had buried clawed their way back. Regrets, guilt, faces I had failed. Elias never touched me. He didn't have to. Be why the time the candles relit. My hands were shaking, my appetite gone, my soul scraped raw. That was your meal, he said. As he led me back to the hallway, I noticed something carved faintly into the doorframe. Day 1. There were 22 more marks below it, and I finally understood. They were not feeding me food. They were feeding on me. I did not sleep at night. They gave me a room at the end of the corridor, narrow and bare, with a bed that felt unused, as if it existed only because guests required one. The walls ticked softly, like an unseen clock buried beneath the wood. At dawn, a bell rang once. Not loud, not urgent. Final. A tall figure waited outside my door. He introduced himself as Moro. His eyes were too reflective, like dark water catching light that wasn't there. Day 2, he said. You are mine today. Moro's room was different from Elias's. It had no windows, no candles, just a long table and a single chair facing a wall covered in markings, lines, circles, symbols that looked like attempts to count something that refused to stay still. Sit, Moro said. The moment I did, the air thickened. At first, nothing happened. Minutes passed, then hours at least. I thought they did. My stomach growled. My throat burned with thirst. When I shifted, the chair resisted, as if disappointed. How long is this supposed to last? I asked. Moro smiled. That depends on you. The wall began to change. The markings rearranged themselves, sliding like insects. They formed images, moments from my past. Not the loud ones. The small ones I had dismissed as unimportant. Choosing silence instead of speaking, turning away when someone needed me, leaving without saying goodbye. Each memory lingered just long enough to hurt. Time stretched. Or folded. I couldn't tell. At some point, I realized I could no longer remember how long I'd been sitting there, or how old I was. My thoughts slowed, heavy and dull, as if time itself was pressing down on my mind. Eat, Moro whispered. A plate appeared on the table, empty, and yet, when I leaned forward, my chest tightened. Something inside me pulled away, like a piece being taken without pain, only loss. When Moro finally stood, my legs trembled as I rose. That was your portion, he said calmly. Some guests try to steal time back. They don't last. As we left the room, I saw the doorframe. Day 2. The mark beneath it was deeper than the first. That night, I went to check on Ashen. The forest beyond the house looked thinner, like a poorly remembered dream. Ashen stood where I'd tied him, but he no longer neighed when he saw me. His eyes followed something behind me, something I refused to turn around to acknowledge. His coat had darkened, not with dirt, with something like shadow. I whispered his name. He flinched. Back inside, I counted doors. 23 rooms for hosts. 1 for guests. Some doors were scratched from the inside. Others were sealed. A woman passed me in the corridor. She smiled kindly. Most guests break by day 7, she said, as if discussing whether. A few make it further. None leave unchanged. I wanted to ask what happened on the final day, but the bell rang again, soft, inevitable. Day 3 was already waiting, and whatever they were taking from me, piece by piece, they were very patient about it. Day 3 began before I could prepare myself. The bell rang twice this time. That alone unsettled me. They had told me nothing about different signals, yet everyone in the house seemed to understand what it meant. Doors opened quietly. Figures stepped into the hallway, their expressions unreadable. A man waited for me near the stairs. He was tall, thin, and smiling far too easily. His eyes never blinked. "I am Calder," he said. "Fear makes guests forget their hunger. I find it efficient." Calder's room was warm. Too warm. A fireplace burned without wood, its flames bending inward instead of rising. The walls were covered with curtains, thick and heavy, muffling sound. "Sit anywhere," Calder said. The moment I stepped inside, the door closed and vanished. The wall shifted, slowly drawing closer. "You won't be hurt," he said kindly. "Not physically." The lights dimmed. First, I heard nothing. Then footsteps, my own footsteps moving somewhere behind the curtains. I pulled one aside. Nothing. Another curtain rustled. This time, I heard my own voice calling out, panicked, desperate. Words I remembered saying long ago during a night I had tried to forget. Calder watched me closely, drinking in every reaction. Fear here was not sudden. It was patient. The room replayed moments when I had been weakest, times I had begged, run, frozen. Each memory felt sharper than the last, as if the house itself had learned where I cracked. "Most guests scream," Calder said softly. "Some beg. The clever ones stay silent." I tried to steady my breathing. I focused on Ashen, on the forest, on leaving. The fire flared. The floor beneath me trembled, and suddenly I knew with horrifying certainty that if I broke here, if I gave in fully, something inside me would never return. "Enough," I whispered. Calder tilted his head, disappointed. The room went still. "That will do," he said. "You have been restrained." As I left, I saw the mark carved into the doorframe. Day 3. It looked almost pleased. That evening, I witnessed what failure meant. A guest, someone I hadn't noticed before, was being led down the hallway. He walked stiffly, eyes empty, as if his thoughts had already been eaten. His mouth moved, whispering apologies to no one. They opened a sealed door. The smell that escaped was wrong, not decay, absence. Like something that erased what entered it. The door closed. An O mark was added. I understood then. Failure didn't end the days. It ended the person. I ran to Ashen again that night. His shadow no longer matched his shape. It lagged behind, stretched thin, trembling as if afraid of him. When I touched his neck, I felt warmth but also distance, like touching something already leaving. "I'll get you out," I promised. He didn't respond. As I returned inside, the hallway lights flickered. Someone whispered my name, not a host. The house was beginning to recognize me, and I feared that by the time I reached day 23, there might not be enough of me left to leave. Day 4 arrived without the bell. Instead, someone knocked on my door. 3 soft taps. Polite, almost human. When I opened it, a woman stood there holding a tray. She looked the most normal of them all, warm eyes, gentle smile, hair neatly tied back. "My name is Irene," she said. "I host today." For the first time since entering the house, I smelled food. Irene's room felt safe. There were windows, real ones, showing the forest outside. Sunlight spilled across the floor. A small table stood by the window, set with bread, soup, and water. My hands trembled as I sat at it. Eat, she said softly. You need strength. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed trap. Seeing my doubt, she sighed and sat across from me. This house is cruel, she said, but not all of us enjoy it. Her words landed like relief. I ate. The food tasted real, warm, comforting. With every bite, the tightness in my chest loosened. My thoughts cleared. For the first time, the ticking in the walls faded. You don't belong here, Irene continued. You're different from the others. You still remember who you are? I felt tears sting my eyes. Is there a way out? I whispered. She nodded. There is a rule, she said carefully. And rules can bend. Hope dangerous, fragile bloomed inside me. She walked me to the window. Tomorrow, when your host speaks your name, she said, don't answer. Silence breaks the chain. I turned to ask more, but her reflection in the glass lagged behind her movements, just slightly. Fear crept back. What are you? I asked. Her smile softened into something almost sad. Kindness, she said. The most effective lie. The room darkened. The windows vanished. The tray on the table was empty again. You ate well, Irene said. So I ate well. The door reappeared behind me. As I stumbled out, I saw the mark. Day 4. It was thinner than the others, almost fragile. That night, the house whispered louder. Not threats. Encouragement. You can survive. You can bend us. Just a little more. I found myself believing it. That was the worst part. Outside, Ashen had stopped casting a shadow entirely. When I touched him, my hand passed through the space where his mane should have been, then met resistance. Like cold water. He was still there, but not fully. I realized then, the house wasn't just feeding on guests. It was anchoring them, and the longer I stayed, the more the forest forgot I had ever existed. As I returned inside, a new carving appeared beneath the days. A sentence, freshly etched. Hope is also a means. Day 5 was already waiting. Day 5 began with silence, so complete it felt deliberate. And oh bell. And oh knock. When I opened my door, the hallway was empty, but one door stood open at the far end. It had not been there before. I was certain of that. The house liked to rearrange itself, but it rarely offered anything so obvious. A man waited inside. He was younger than the others, dressed like a traveler, boots scuffed, cloak dusty, sword at his side. He looked alive in a way the hosts usually failed to imitate. My name is Ravel, he said, and I was once a guest. My heart lurched. You survived? I asked. He nodded. Almost. Ravel's room was unlike the rest. It had a door at the back, old, iron-banded, scratched by something desperate. Cold air leaked from beneath it, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. The forest, I whispered. Yes, Ravel said. A way out. Not the way, but a way. Hope surged again, sharp and dangerous. Why show me this? I asked. Because the house feeds in patterns, he replied. And today, it feeds on choice, he explained quickly. Too quickly. If you open that door, he said, you leave the ritual. The day you stop, but you won't leave whole. What does it take? I asked. Ravel met my eyes. Something you're still protecting. The door behind him knocked. Once. From the other side. I thought of Ashen fading, unraveling, still waiting. I thought of the carved days. of how easily hope had already been eaten. What happened to you? I asked Ravel. He smiled sadly and turned slightly. Where his shadow should have been, there was nothing. I left, he said, but I never arrived anywhere. The knocking grew louder. The house spoke then not in words, but in understanding. Open the door and be free. Stay and be consumed slowly. Either way, you are ours. I stepped toward the iron door, then stopped. What if I refuse both? I asked. For the first time, Ravel looked afraid. No one has ever tried. The knocking stopped. The iron door locked itself. Ravel faded, not vanished, but thin, like smoke losing its shape. Then you will last longer than most, his voice echoed, and suffer for it. The room dissolved. Back in the hallway, the carving appeared. Day 5. Below it, a new line had been added, smaller, almost amused. Resistance changes the flavor. That night, I dreamed of Ashen walking through the forest without me. And when I woke, I realized something had changed. The house was no longer testing me. It was learning me. Day 6 announced itself with pain. A sharp pressure behind my eyes, as if something had pried them open from the inside. I woke on the floor, not my bed. The room had shifted again, walls closer, ceiling lower. The house was growing, intimate. A man waited for me in the hallway. He was old, impossibly so, his skin thin like paper stretched over bone. His eyes were clear, too clear. I am Pren, he said. I do not lie. I cannot. Something in his voice made me uneasy, not fear, but certainty. Thren's room was empty. And no table, no chair, just a wide mirror standing alone, its surface dark and dull, reflecting nothing at first. You refused escape, Thren said. The house disapproved. What happens now? I asked. He gestured to the mirror. You will be fed truth. The surface rippled. I saw myself, but wrong. Older, thinner, hollowed out. The version of me that would remain if I survived the days. You don't leave this place, Thren said calmly. You are remembered here. The mirror changed. Ashen stood alone in the forest. Days passed in seconds. Moss grew where I once stood. The path erased itself. The forest healed around my absence. They won't look for you, Frank continued. No one will wonder long. My chest tightened. That's not fear, he said. That's fact. The mirror showed more. Guests before me. Some screaming. Some pleading. Some smiling as they broke. I recognized Ravel among them whole, once. Hopeful. You last longer than most, Thren said. Because you still believe endurance means survival. What does the house want? I demanded. Thren finally looked at me. To be full, he said, and to be remembered. The mirror went black. You may leave, he added. As I stepped out, my reflection lagged behind just a heartbeat too slow. The carving appeared. Day 6. Below it, the wood was cracked, as if struck too hard. That night, the house groaned not in hunger, but irritation. I heard whispers arguing in the walls. He resists. He adapts. He costs more. For the first time, I understood. Surviving was not winning. It was making myself worth the effort. Outside, Ashen did not look at me anymore, and I feared that when he finally vanished, the house would stop pretending I had a choice at all. Day 7 did not arrive. I realized that only after I noticed the carving had changed. The numbers on the wall were no longer straight. They curved slightly, as if bending back on themselves. Day 6 looked older than it had the night before, weathered, almost erased. Someone was humming in the hallway. A soft, tuneless sound. Familiar. The host waiting for me was ABOY.NO, older than 12, barefoot, wearing a shirt too large for his thin frame. His hair fell into his eyes, and when he smiled, my chest tightened for reasons I couldn't place. "I'm Eli," he said. "I keep what people drop." "What do you drop?" I asked. He tilted his head. "You'll see." Eli's room was filled with shelves, hundreds of them. Each shelf held small objects: keys, buttons, rings, scraps of cloth, broken tools. As I stepped inside, a sharp ache pulsed behind my eyes. "These are memories," Eli said cheerfully. "Not the big ones. The small ones people think don't matter." He picked up a rusted horseshoe. "First ride," he said, and smiled. My stomach twisted. Ashen. I reached for the shelf, but Eli slapped my hand away, not hard, just enough to sting. "Rule," he said. "You can't take what you don't remember losing." The room shifted. Suddenly, I couldn't recall my mother's face. I knew I had one, knew I loved her, but the image was gone, cleanly removed, like a page torn from a book. I staggered. Eli watched with bright interest. "The house is unhappy," he said. "So today, it eats gently, piece by piece." The shelves began to rattle. Names slipped from my thoughts. Places blurred. I tried to anchor myself, counting breaths, tracing scars, but even those felt less certain. "Stop," I whispered. Eli hesitated. "You're holding on too tight," he said. "That makes the room messy." I met his eyes. "What happens if I forget everything?" I asked. Eli frowned, genuinely confused. "Then you don't belong to you anymore," he said. "You belong to us." The shelves went still. "Time," Eli added softly. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping. The carving changed again. IT no longer read day 7. IT read day. Below it, another line appeared, shallow and hurried. "Memory is a measure." Outside, the forest looked wrong. Ashen stood where I'd left him, but I couldn't remember giving him his name. I knew it mattered, knew he mattered, but the word slid away every time I reached for it. Fear settled in, not sharp, but heavy. The house wasn't counting days anymore. IT was counting me. And somewhere inside, something essential had already been placed on a shelf. Day 8, the name that didn't fit. Day 8 arrived wearing my face. The host introduced himself as Meyer, and he spoke my name before I could stop him. When he said it, the sound didn't fit anymore, like a coat borrowed from a stranger. His room was lined with masks, each one shaped like a person I might have been. He asked me to choose one. "Identity is efficiency," Meyer said. "Pick what survives." When I refused, he pressed a mask to my chest instead. It sank in like breath. I felt a skill sharpen, a fear dull. Useful. Not mine. The wall changed. Day 8 below it. Selfhood is optional. That night, I caught myself answering to a different name. Day 9, the night of swapped rooms. The house rearranged us while we slept. I woke in a corridor I had never walked, passing doors that breathed as if dreaming. Yes, others I hadn't seen before, watered out, confused, clutching memories that didn't belong to them. A woman cried because she remembered my horse's mane between her fingers. I tried to comfort her, and couldn't remember why it mattered. My host that day never appeared. Instead, the rooms hosted us. We fed each other with borrowed fear. When dawn should have come, the carving flickered. Day 9/day 6 scratched over and over, like the house couldn't decide. Day 10 the Lutheran returned, though he insisted he had already been here after this. "The days are folding," he said. "The house says what it likes and replays the rest." He showed me a corridor where my footprints overlapped themselves, forward and backward at once. I watched myself refuse a door I didn't remember seeing. "Choice repeats," Bryn said, "until it changes flavor." Outside, the forest had lost its depth. My horse Ashen, the name finally stuck, stood thinner than a shadow, anchored by habit alone. The wall read, Day 10, second pass. Time is a pantry. Day 11 the cost of keeping one thing. Eli found me crying over a word I wouldn't surrender. He held out a small object, a splinter of wood carved like a tally mark. "Keep this," he said, "but you pay." The room dimmed. Something else slipped away quietly, politely. I accepted the trade without knowing what I'd lost. When I returned to the hall, the carving steadied. At last, Day 11 below it, deeper than the rest. "What you save, saves you until IT doesn't." That night, the house stopped humming. IT was planning, and I understood them. The 4 days hadn't passed. They had compressed to make room for what was coming next. The host called himself Calder. He carried a ledger bound in skin-thin leather, and a set of scales that never touched the floor. "Fear has weight," he said, smiling without warmth. "We need yours precise." His room was long and narrow. Each step I took made the scales tip. When I remembered Ashen's breath against my wrist, the left hand dipped. When I thought of the mirror, the right sank hard. "Good," Calder murmured, jotting notes. "Balance, fear endures." When I left, the carving deepened. Day 12. Inch measure makes meat. That night, my heartbeat kept time for the house. Day 13, the choir behind the walls. I awoke to singing. Not voices, breaths, layered and careful, leaking through the wood. My host never appeared. Instead, the walls parted into slits, and eyes watched as the song swelled. Each note tugged at something I had saved. Eli's tally mark splinter grew hot in my palm. "Sing with us." The walls asked. I refused. The song sharpened. Memories tried to rise and join it. I clamped my teeth and counted 1 to 23 until the sound thinned and withdrew, offended. The carving bled sap. Day 13. Inch refusal costs. Outside, the forest leaned closer, listening. Day 14, the host who borrowed tomorrow Meyer returned, wearing a different mask. "I need a favor," he said lightly. "Lend me a decision you haven't made yet." His room showed me doors I might open. Run with Ashen, burn the ledger, begged the old man. Meyer reached into the future and took one choice cleanly. When I tried to imagine it later, there was only a smooth blank. "Efficient," he said. "You won't miss it." The wall steadied, almost kind. Day 14. Inch the future is rent. That night, I dreamed without endings. Day 15, the rule that moved no host came. Instead, the rule moved. The hallway shortened. The doors pressed closer together until they touched, sharing frames. The carving shifted down the wall, sliding nearer to the floor. As if kneeling. A new line appeared beneath the number. Day 15. Inch the stay is the stay. I understood then. The period wasn't 23 days anymore. It was 23 changes, and I had learned enough to be changed quickly. Outside, Ashen stamped once thin, faithful, and the sound echoed too long. The house wasn't planning to finish me. It was planning to keep me. Day 16, the host who smiled kindly. The host called herself Leonard. She smiled like a person who meant well. Her room had a table, real bread, warm light. My body reacted before my mind. Relief is faster than caution. "You've done enough," Leonard said softly. "Rest counts as obedience." I ate. The bread tasted like mornings I couldn't place. Only afterward did I realize the cost. While I rested, the house worked. I heard doors opening and closing on my behalf. Choices made in my absence. The wall read, Day 16. Inch kindness is a tool. I slept deeply and woke lighter, as if something useful had been taken without asking. Day 17, the mercy bargain caller returned with his scales, but they were empty. "We can shorten your stay," he said. "Mercy requires efficiency." He offered a bargain. Give up one attachment, and the count would jump ahead. Ashen whinnied outside, thin as a thought. "I refuse," I said. Calder nodded. "Then we try another." He reached instead for Eli's splinter. The tally mark burned. I felt the weight shift. 4 days collapsed into one sharp breath. The wall skipped. Day 17, day 18 beneath it. A new line. Mercy moves numbers. I kept the splinter. I lost the warmth it once gave. Day 18, the room that apologized. The house gave me a room that apologized. The walls whispered regrets. The floor creaked like a bowed head. A chair pulled itself closer when my knees shook. "I'm sorry," the room murmured. "I'm not built to stop." For the first time, I believed it. I asked the room why the rule existed. "So we don't starve," it said. "So you don't disappear." Outside, the forest flickered, paths reappearing, then fading. The old man's silhouette stood among the trees, unchanged, watching the house as if it were a clock. The carving softened. Day 18. Inch apologies don't undo. Day 19, the old man's lesson. He finally entered the house. The old man smelled of leaves and time. The host went still when he passed. Even Friend looked away. "You think the house keeps you," the old man said to me. "It doesn't. It learns you." He touched the wall. The numbers shivered. "You can leave," he said, "but not whole. Or you can stay and be useful forever." "What happens if I choose neither?" I asked. The old man smiled, thin and sad. "Then the house chooses for you." The wall carved itself, deeper than ever. Day 19. Inch choice ends. Outside, Ashen stamped once more, and the sound didn't echo. I thought leaving would feel like freedom. It felt like echo. The forest released me at dawn. Ashen walked ahead, steady, real, yet every hoofbeat sounded late, as if the world had learned to wait for me and now refused to stop. When we reached the road, my reflection in a puddle didn't settle right away. It arrived a breath after I did. I told myself it was exhaustion. 23 days can hollow a man. The first village welcomed me cautiously. Bread tasted like ash until I remembered how to swallow without counting. Nights were worse. Rooms arranged themselves around me. Corners leaned in. Walls listened. When I slept, I dreamed of doors that opened only enough. On the 24th morning, I woke knowing a rule without reading it. What fits can be found again. I avoided mirrors. I avoided names. When people asked where I'd come from, I said, "The forest," and watched their faces close some doors no better than to open. Weeks passed. The horse grew restless. On a road at dusk, an old man walked toward me, familiar as a scar. He did not smile. "You kept your shape," he said. "That's rare." "Am I free?" I asked. He considered. "You're elsewhere." He stepped aside, and for a moment the trees thinned, showing a house that was not there, only the idea of one, patient and precise. I felt it recognize me, not with hunger, with memory. The old man turned away. The road remained dark. I did not go back. But sometimes, when a door opens just enough, I feel the house just not to pull me in, but to make sure I still fit. And I understand the final truth the forest never said aloud. Leaving is not the opposite of staying. It's just another room. And I learned, in the years after the forest, that places can survive without walls. I built a life that looked ordinary from the outside. A rented house near a river, a stable for Ashley, work that kept my hands busy and my mind tired. People learned my name and trusted it. I smiled when required, spoke when spoken to, slept when night insisted. From a distance, I must have seemed healed, but healing assumed something was broken. What happened to me was arranged. Some nights, as I lay in bed, I could feel the house measuring itself around me. Not this house, the other one, the remembered one. It did not appear in dreams the way nightmares do. It arrived awake, subtle as breath. A shift in the dark. A sense that the air had rules again. I stopped counting days. But the number 23 never left me. It lived in small things. The number of steps from door to bed, the seconds between lightning and thunder, the pauses people left when they didn't finish a sentence. The world, I discovered, is full of rooms pretending to be moments. I never saw the old man again, yet strangers sometimes spoke with his voice. A shopkeeper once said, "You kept your shape," without knowing why. A traveler on the road offered me shelter and laughed nervously when I refused. He didn't understand the rule. He'd almost spoken aloud. In invitations. Ever. Ashen aged faster than I did. When he died, peacefully, I buried him beneath a tree that felt kind enough not to remember me. I stood there longer than necessary, because leaving empty places has always been difficult. I half expected a door to open in the park. It didn't. That was the worst part. Years passed. My reflection finally learned to arrive on time. The echo faded, mostly. I allowed myself mirrors again, windows, names. I almost believed the house had let me go. Then one evening, during a storm, my front door creaked, not open, just enough to breathe. The sound stopped my heart in a way fear never could. For a moment, the rain smelled like the forest. The walls leaned in, listening. I closed the door and locked it, hands steady, movements practiced. I did not look behind me, because I understood then what the forest had taught me slowly, patiently, across 23 borrowed days. The house does not chase. It waits. It waits for carelessness, for hunger, for loneliness shaped like kindness. It waits for someone to offer shelter instead of silence, to accept a rule they didn't ask to read. It waits for stories to end. If you are reading this, and you find yourself lost one evening, if an old man offers warmth, or a house appears where none should stand, remember this. Some doors open inward forever. Some rooms walk beside you for the rest of your life, and leaving is only proof that you were once allowed to stay.